Welcome to the show, everybody. Micah with Coronavirus Diaries, and I am blessed today to be able to speak with Gabriel Aguilera. He is an artist, a teacher, and a social justice activist. We had met a while back through a mutual acquaintance, and it's been a pleasure to know him thus far. I'm really looking forward to have him become a regular member on the show, but without me giving too much information, I'm just going to throw it over to you, Luis, and, would you mind sharing with the viewer, the listener, who are you, where are you from, where do you see yourself going?
Okay, thank you for having me on the show. As you said, I am both an artist, actually not just both, but an artist and a teacher and also a social justice activist. What do I do for my day job is that I do a lot of laboring as well, skilled labor, and I trade a little bit lightly, so that's something I play around with as well. Um, but anyway, in terms of art, I make music, that's one thing. And I'm currently working on a second book. So I started laying that out as well. I have one book published, a memoir, which got published 20 years ago, actually, coming up in April
Well,
at the University of
congratulations.
Chicago.
That's
Thank
a
you.
big
Yeah,
deal.
yeah, it is a big deal. Over at the University of Chicago Press. And so right now I've been laying out the next book, which hopefully I will start working on in terms of, sort of meeting it out, giving it something to the skeleton for the next
And
year or so.
and you're in Chicago right now?
I'm currently in Chicago. I also am a teacher. I have a master's degree in teaching languages. So I'm actually right now also working on a 120-hour TEFL course online.
Sure.
And I should be finishing up with those exams next week, hopefully. Uh,
Outstanding. Good
yeah,
luck with
so
that. It's good. You're
yes,
you're already on top of it. You're learning
what you
on
know
the
what one
course.
of right well one of the things I had spoken to my high school students about many moons ago when I was a teacher was that we should be developing or diversifying our portfolio of skills, because things as they are with technology advancing the way it is. I saw that things were going to be changing very quickly and very rapidly,
And
right?
this is before the COVID pandemic, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up half of the time in analog world, and then in the late 90s is when I first got my internet connection and I first got my email.
Dial
And so
up.
I,
It's like
right,
that dial up life. Yeah.
right, so I've seen both sides of it. And for myself, I've said to myself, I should be able to do something with my mind, but I should be able to do something with my hands as well. And that's why I diversified my own skill sets, and it's served me really well so far. So I also have a 200-hour Hatha Yoga teacher certificate that I earned last year in February in India. So after practicing for about 15 years of yoga in the studios here in Chicago, I decided to go ahead and at the late age of 46, go to India and retrieve that certificate, or actually earn it, right? Work for it.
Yeah, I mean that's
So
great. It just goes to show you for all the viewers, listeners, that it isn't too late ever. And if anything, right now is the perfect opportunity to pursue and to go after these other skill sets, this other knowledge. That it's
you know,
obviously everybody's going to have a challenge moving forward, but
And you know
um,
what? That's it. And it's a matter of perception, right? It's always a matter of perception. And so right now, a lot of people I think are feeling tunneled because their world's closing in on them, and they think everything's being turned upside down, which it is. And the projects or whatever activity they had going on in their lives are no longer what they're doing, and you can't think that you are the tunnel. You have to understand that it's always open. There's always possibilities. There's always a potential to do something else. There's always a potential to keep cultivating those positive aspects in your life that will lead to other openings too. So just
it's
because a door closes doesn't mean that it's over. That might mean that there's a window to go through instead.
yeah,
You
it's the
know.
old adage of when one door closes, another one opens.
Yep.
Don't
And
don't fix your focus.
absolutely, because once you fixate on that tunnel, then everything gets darkened, and then anxiety takes over, and then you start breaking down, and that's when you're really taken in by the
Sure.
situation. Mhm.
Sure. So, we can get to maybe a little bit of stuff about what's going on in Chicago and your insights with the COVID stuff. I think for the purpose of the show, it'd be interesting. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey when you went to India, you'd said you've been practicing yoga for quite a while, 15 years, and
Right.
then
So,
you went and transplanted to
mhm.
India to go and do this epic course, this training. Bring us into that a little bit. Explain that.
Well, let me give you a little bit background. So I started practicing yoga about 15 years ago, after I had realized, through a very shocking event in my life, that I'd been depressed since the age of 9. And I had, not been able to sort that out through various means, whether it was working out, hanging out, spending time with family, friends, and that sort of thing. And so what I did was I started doing therapy and yoga simultaneously. Um, and with the therapy, I was able to unravel a lot of the trauma and kind of understand it and get a grasp of it, and also overextend my emotional vocabulary to be able to understand what it is that I went through. But with the yoga, it started building me up, and it started building my inner presence a lot more. And it also got me to the point of becoming more clear-headed and introspective. So yeah, I felt the physiological effects of it, but I also started feeling, the enlarging, the widening of the introspective nature of who we are as people. And so, I had done a lot of other types of activities before, like I had biked a lot, weight lifted. I was a lifeguard for 7 years. So I was very much involved with types of physical activities that were somehow taking care of the depression. But this was different. It just felt like there was unlimited amount of energy, unlimited amount of like benefits coming out of it.
Well,
And
it
so I
sounds,
stuck with it. Yeah, I
yeah.
stuck with it. So it became doing something once a week. And then 5, 6 years later on, I started doing it 2, 3 times a week. And that's when I really, really honed in on the idea that this was doing something far different to my body
Well,
and to my mind.
it sounds
Yeah.
like you found a tool or a set of tools, and over a period of time, you just continue to sharpen them and make them more effective.
I,
Do you mind sharing a little
what,
bit of what it was or how it was that allowed you to kind of get to where you're at now?
Well, it's authentic yoga is an ancient tradition, an ancient spiritual tradition. It's a discipline that works at a very subtle level, and a lot of Westerners and a lot of folks here in the United States just see the asanas, the yogic poses. And what I started noticing when I started working 2, 3 times a week at various yoga studios here in Chicago is that it was not just recalibrating my body physiologically to optimal levels. But I started seeing that there was a reduction in clutter in my mind and my understanding of things, and there was an increase in clarity. And so, vision for several of my projects, say making music, became more clarified in that process. And so, I started seeing an actual production rate go up higher. And I've not just my mood was better, not just was my attitude better to things, but I was understanding and experiencing a sense of refinement in my person. And now I had a tremendous amount of successes before. I got accepted at the University of Chicago. They pay for my room and board. That's a big, big, big deal, right?
Of course it is.
Um,
Yeah, that's
I got published as an author. I had been DJing, and one of my last big DJ gigs was in Costa Rica. And so I had knowledge of what success was at that point. But I could see with this particular practice that it was truly giving me great platforms of strengths to build on at the physical, intellectual, and emotional and spiritual energy levels. And that's when I said, you know what? After doing it 3, 4 times a week, I said, you know what? I got to do this daily. And so 6 years ago, I committed to a daily practice, and it has not stopped since then. And I continuously see an evolution with it, a refinement of myself as an individual. I'm in great shape. I feel great. Um, and the clarity that I receive from that is just tremendous. It's incredible. It's an incredible process. So last year I said, you know what, I need to take this to the next level and go learn. I'm just barely scratching the surface here.
sure.
And so when I went to India I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to dedicate myself to Hatha yoga, which is a particular type of yoga with a prescription from Patanjali. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, right? So there's an eightfold path, and so there's an actual methodological manner to the whole process.
Yeah, you
So
start
that,
going into that too soon with me, and it's gonna go over the
yeah, so
top.
we'll keep it right there. But basically,
Before we
it's
jump into
very
this,
methodical.
yeah, before we go too far,
Uh-huh.
I'm noticing a commonality with. I had just spoken with somebody else, an online business coach, Carrie McCallsky, who amazing individual, but there is some commonalities between one, understanding yourself that
Hmm.
she talked about with business coaching, but also mentorship and finding that. And it's there's these parallel tracks that whether it's business or personal life, and it sounds like that's something that you became aware of. You became more understanding of yourself, where you were at, you found the tools, and then you sought out a mentor. And it sounds like it's brought you to this place now, that's elevated from where you were even just a year ago.
Right. Well, I had also gone through a phase earlier on by the time about 9 or 10 in terms of what is identity. And so I started understanding that I wasn't just this tiny self, whatever it was that I was latching on to. So when people say, "What are you?" I don't say I'm a teacher. I teach. Currently, I'm writing. I don't say I'm a writer. I don't adhere or attach myself to any particular identity. What I'm doing is what I'm doing,
Right.
and whether or not I'm good at it is determined by myself and other people, right? But so what I've realized with my process is that I'm investigating the inner workings of a greater self, which we all have. And that greater self has nothing to do with this worldly process in a way. And it's paradox because at the same time, while we're learning about ourselves here, this inner self, this greater self, has nothing to do with here. It has to do with a universal consciousness, a universal energy that keeps it all together and working and flowing and gives us the not the allowance, the permission to be. And so that is what I'm really kind of working with and playing with. So it's a little bit different than sort of investigating in myself at an individual level. It's more of a greater self level. And it's more sublime, it's a bit more sublime.
Oh, that's great. I think in the coming weeks, months, and maybe year or years, I want to believe that even as a global collective, a global society, um, there's going to be that higher level of consciousness that comes from this, whether it's just an understanding of the fundamentals of global supply chains and how businesses interconnect, and then within those businesses there's people, and everybody has to be doing their own little piece in order to make what we know as our reality a reality.
Yeah, I think having gone through a lot of traumatic experiences myself, there's going to be reflection time as well. And people are going to wake up to the understanding of how interconnected we are with one another. Already in a big city, folks are starting to understand the calm that comes with not having traffic outside, which is very different than the hustle bustle that we had going on for so long, right?
Sure.
And in that calm, in that pause, that actually allows room for reflection. And a lot of folks are going to rethink what is it that's important to them and what isn't that is not important to them, and how we fit with one another in the greater scheme of things. I do also think, as a teacher, a master's degree in teaching languages and having had high school students, over 600 high school students that I've had to taught, there may not be a capacity for everyone to be able to think these big ideas. And
Sure.
it's a lot to wrap yourself around. Um, so, but I think there still will be some sort of raising of consciousness overall.
So you'd mentioned, you've let's jump into Chicago, kind of,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
over the last, say, 2 weeks. What kind of stuff are you noticing with Chicago? Are you guys still allowed to go out, like go outside and walk around in parks? Are people taking social distancing to heart and really doing that.
Oh,
What's
there definitely.
business?
Oh
As
yeah, absolutely.
businesses shut down, like just kind of give me the rundown, take, walk me through businesses and social interactions and, personal life.
I am seeing a lot of small businesses that have been shut down. I'm seeing a lot of less traffic on the streets, much less traffic, and people are adhering to the social distancing, mandate that is occurring, that has occurred here. So, it, small businesses are going to suffer from this, and that's unfortunate. A lot of mom and pops are going to suffer
Yeah,
all across the country, and that's not a good thing. So no one really knows. The data isn't very good in general. We haven't been testing at the rates like say South Korea or another place that's been testing a lot, like Germany.
sure.
So we just don't know, right? And
Yeah,
so what I am seeing is that a lot of folks are reacting on ambiguities and speculation, and that leaves room for a lot of argument and a lot of tension. And so, because we have a very uninformed folks, chiming in, um, it, that's I think is what's going to create a little bit of problems for the next couple of weeks. As people get a
sure.
little bit more cabin fever and that sort of thing,
It's very
because they.
valid. The data that you're talking about is a
Mhm.
very, very relevant and
Mhm.
timely discussion. Is the little bits of information that we're getting. There's so many variables and there's so many elements that contribute. I just talked in a video yesterday about some of the variables that could impact it positively, like the potential for like the most dramatic thing to happen could be impacted by social outreach, these companies that are shifting their workflows or their manufacturing to accommodate the needs, the people that are volunteering their times and efforts, and maybe inventions, even like the DIY community that's 3D printing little valves for these machines that are needed in New York right now. Like there's just so many variables. I think it's a really good point that you brought up that,
Yeah, and for instance, another example is the fuel cell technology that's coming through in LA. And I just saw a report yesterday from the LA Times that they're going to be revamping 300 ventilators by a company that does fuel cell technology.
yeah,
And so that's a great thing. What I'm worried about is how are the poor, the less well off, and the small businesses, how are these folks going to handle all of this? Um, I don't see the big boys losing out on this as much as the rest of those folks. And that's my greatest concern. That's always my biggest worry, is the more vulnerable sections of our society. When I
yeah,
was a high school teacher, I was taught mostly low income kids,
sure.
and they are going to be dealing with some of the worst aspects of it, and they're already getting left out of the voice of what's happening. No one's asking them, what do you need? You
Yeah, and
know?
there's two very large populations globally that are beginning to get impacted, and yet the numbers. I mean, you're talking almost half the world's population in India and Africa. And there is a significance of poverty in these areas. So, I mean, really, what you're talking about here is, hashtag we not me type of a movement where,
Right.
like, realistically, your neighbors, you know, they might not necessarily be down the road, but it's a it's a global society at this point. So it's maybe this is
Absolutely.
what it took for an awakening to actually happen.
Yeah, and I I go back to my own philosophical understanding of all this. I mean, do we need?
Uh-oh, we got an unstable internet connection. Let's give it a minute. Oh,
Uh,
you're back. You're
am I
back.
back? All right, great.
Welcome
Okay,
to the new world.
that's hilarious. I don't know what that was about. Maybe I need to turn some stuff off. There we go. Turn this
But
off. There. Yeah, but yeah, it's when I went to India, I saw that poverty.
right.
And it was interesting because when I drove there, I was asleep. Well, actually, someone drove me from New Delhi 7 hours to the retreat center where I was going to work, the Akshara Yoga School. And on the way there, so since I slept, I didn't get to see it as much. But on the way back, I was placed on a train and I got to see the poverty. And I'm going to tell you, there was a point where I literally cried for 15 minutes straight.
I had my own struggle. I rode the night train from
Hmm.
Agra to Varanasi.
Oh, so you know.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I think everybody from a developed country should definitely be like transplanted into a third world or developing country and not in the tourist area,
Absolutely.
like for real be in it. And there is some sort, I mean, I had seen it like a long time ago with prior, like being in the military and being in Iraq and seeing the communities and just being like, wow. But that's like war torn countries. When you see it in a country that's appears to be functioning,
Right.
but then you just see the amount of poverty and just how difficult it is. It definitely made it a little more difficult for me to come back to the States and see how people prioritized their livelihoods. So,
And you know what was, to me, what was more shocking than that was how much tolerance there was for it. And that's what really caused me to tear up, because these folks on the train, it's as if it's just part of the day, a part and parcel for the day, right?
right,
And I fear that. I fear what is going to be happening to this country, and if people are just going to look away to all these poor, which are in the millions.
right.
And what are we going to do for them? You know, how are we going to take care of them in a way where they become self-empowered and they're able to do something for themselves?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
a big question, right?
it is a very big question, and maybe we just leave that for the viewers in the comments below.
Right,
We would
right,
love, and
right.
this is for everybody that's listening, viewing. Ideally, what I'd like to do with these eventually is be doing live sessions, and we can end up having people interact live.
Right, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a good time. So maybe we call it there. We're going to bring this back. We'll run it back here in about a week or
We will.
so. And I think you shared a lot. Thank you for being on the show, Luis. It's
Okay,
been a
great,
pleasure.
great.
Was there anything that you wanted to touch base on before we go?
You know, I keep harping is not probably the best word to use for it, but I keep letting people know, because my students ask me what can I do in a time like this, and it's the same answer I give them all the time. You practice, 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 because by centering yourself, by calming yourself down, you can be a pillar of strength for other people, and they will emulate. They will come. They will try to do the same practice. They will, or gather some force to do some other type of practice. But the best thing we can do is take care of ourselves, and not in a selfish way, not in an egotistical way, but in a way that we know that we are enriching ourselves, both in the physical, intellectual, and emotional and spiritual way.
I mean, it
And
sounds like
that's it.
you got to
Yeah.
love yourself before you can love others, right?
Absolutely, and there's some technique and machinations behind that. It isn't just a. I always tell people take care of yourself, but that means not just in an emotive sense, not just in a sentimental sense, but actually do things that take care of yourself. Do a little bit of exercise at home. Yoga is a perfect thing to do at home,
Sure.
and especially at times like this, and always and every time,
Yeah,
right?
you don't need a machine. You don't need
You don't.
machines or weights or any of that kind of stuff.
And we got tons of stuff out there for that online. You could look into all sorts of good diets, all sorts of good exercise, all sorts of good things to do. So I think that's my number one takeaway right now.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
Well, we'll definitely circle back to
yeah, we
getting some of
will.
your insights in actually practicing yoga. That's what I'd really like to do next time for the viewers, listeners. Check out the next one that we do with Luis Aguilera because ideally we're going to be touching on some of these techniques and that. But for now, be sure I'll have his information and links below. Luis, thank you so much
Yep.
for being on. It's been a pleasure as always.
Cheers, Micah.
And
Thank you.
stay safe down there in Chicago. And for all the viewers and listeners, we'll see you around.
Great. And thank you for having me on the show. Okay.